Well, it's that time of the year again where most of these teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs and currently is in the off season, they have officially announced the end of season roster. And every single year I always do a video where I talk about the Quakes and their announcement of the end of season rosters. And today they of course have just officially released that. So today is the day where I finally get to make the video talking about some of the end of the season roster that the Quakes, of course, have made. Now, one thing it's important to know in terms of this video is that just because all those players that have either have their contract declined or the fact that they're out of contract doesn't mean that they automatically will not be with the club later on. Players that had their contract declined, they can always potentially have their contract accepted if the teams decide to continue to negotiate, or if players that is currently out of contract, there's still ongoing talks of those players potentially having their contract extended. And in this case, obviously, a lot of people is asking the question of what's going to happen with Wando this offseason, and that, I, of course, we'll get to that part, but from what I heard, they are working hard in terms of trying to negotiate a 1 year contract for Wando to stay with the Quakes. I mean, I can't imagine Wando would be leaving the Quakes for his very final season playing, and that I just that would be just kind of insane if that, of course, would be the case. But let us start with players that have their contract exercised. So you got 4 players that had their contract exercised this offseason. You got JT Marcinkowski, Daniel Vega, which I'm kind of shocked the fact that the team decided to exercise his contract. But then the more I kind of thought about it, and I know there's a lot of people that are not happy that Vega is back with this team, but the more I think about it, I don't mind Vega if he is going to be back with this team and he's going to be kind of our reserve goalkeeper and the backup for JT Marcinkowski, because definitely need a decent backup for us in the goalkeeping position, and that, in case if JT does went down, I wouldn't mind Daniel Vega come in as the backup, because as much as there's been a lot of criticism, and I'm also one of those people that are heavy critics of what Daniel Vega has done during this season, of how he has some very horrible performance. There's also some performance that he has been incredible, and that the only thing that's kind of frustrated me about Vega is that he's very inconsistent, and that I don't mind the fact that if our backup goalkeeper is going be inconsistent, but if you're a starting goalkeeper and you're basically inconsistent, then that is of course the issue, and that I don't mind to see him be the backup with JT Marcinkowski, and JT can maybe learn a thing from Daniel Vega and be kind of like a mentor for him heading into next season. And then we got 2 other players that have their contract exercised. You got Jacob Akinwich and Jack Stahan. Both of those guys, well, one of them, I think we signed him as a homegrown player, and one of them we got them a couple of years from the draft. Actually, I think it was last year we got Jack Stahan off of the Super Draft. Now, for players that have their contract declined, we got Goran Kasia, Luis Felipe, and most importantly, Vaco. And I think there's been a lot of discussion of the fact that whether or not if Vaco is going to be coming back this season, and that there are some people that say that they don't want to see Vaco back because of the things that he's been with the Quakes and how he's been kind of inconsistent. But there's also people say that they want Vaco back because of the fact that he can at times be one of the best players for this Quakes team, but because of the fact that I think the club feel like he was just being a little bit too inconsistent, and the fact that he also owns one of the our DP spot, and we want to open a DP spot so we can potentially find a new number 10 this off season, they decided to decline his option, and that I don't think he's probably going to come back with this team. Goran Kasia, I don't think he's going to come back. I mean, he kind of lost his starting position a couple of months back, and you can definitely see with him starting to get a little bit older, he is definitely not as good as when he came to this team about 2 years ago. And Luis Felipe, he's been kind of a long time backup for the Quakes. I think they won't mind dumping his contract and take a little bit hit in terms of that midfield depth, consider they do have some decent one in there. So yeah, I don't see all three of these players coming back for the Quakes this off season, and I don't see the club even have any second consideration of maybe signing them in a couple of days. Now, players that is under contract for the Quakes, we got a couple of them, and all these players are actually in the current rosters for the Quakes heading into next season. You got Imi Ochoa, who is a homegrown player, Tanner Beeson, who we got from last year's Super Draft, Florian Youngworth, Nick Lima, Marcos Lopez, Paul Marie, who just had his contract extended today, Tommy Thompson, Casey Walls, another homegrown player, Eric Calvillo, Christian Espinoza, Carlos Fierro, Gilbert Fuentes, Sid Haji, Judson, Shea Salinas, who also had his contract extended just yesterday. And I'm happy the fact that Salinas is back with this team, because besides Wando being such a legend to this team, I think you could argue that Shea Salinas is just as big and just as important as it is with him being with the Quakes. Sure, yes, he's not like Wando where he's been with this team for his entire career, but the amount of time and the fact that he's been with this team for almost 12 years now, and is one of the few people that is on this team when the Quakes, of course, came back to San Jose. It's definitely incredible to see how he has been with this team, despite the fact there's been numerous players that have been in and out of this team, and he's one of those original guys that is still there with this team. Then we got K Cow and unfortunately Andy Rios, which I was really hoping we can offload him this off season because of the ineffectiveness that he had, but it seemed like since he's under contract, we could not unfortunately move him out unless if we decided to just straight on terminate his contract, or the fact that if there's another team potentially are interested to get Andy Rios. Now, in terms of the loan situation, we got Alanis, one of the only player that is currently on loan for our team, as he is on loan from Chivas, and that this is actually his second year of a 2-year loan, and this is going to be a little bit interesting in that there's going to be some decision I think the Quakes might have to make heading to the next year off season, of whether or not if they're going to sign Alanis on outright from Chivas, or the fact that they're just going to loan him back. I feel like maybe they're probably going to loan him back to Chivas, and that's not saying that Alanis hasn't been great for us. I think there's been times that he has been decent, but when you look at his age and the fact that I feel like Alanis could potentially, my fear is he's going to fall into the Gorham Cassia situation, where when he does come to the Quakes, he is a very decent player, but since he is also on the wrong end of 30s, and he's also kind of a low kind of defender, that means that yeah, things are going to continue to go downhill for him, and that I don't know if the Quakes are even going to be for a team that have been saying that they want to get younger and they want to build a young core. I don't think Alanis would be a good example of us trying to get younger and trying to not just keep signing old players from our team. So most likely, I don't think Alanis is going to be back, and that the Quakes are going to be signing him on a permit deal, but he's still going to be with the Quakes next year, because that is his second year of a 2-year loan with the Quakes from Chivas. Now, players that is currently out of contract, got Matt Brisano, but even though he's out of contract, there is a bona fide offer that the Quakes are offering him, and it would be interesting to see if Matt Brisano would accept that bona fide offer to continue with the Quakes. Danny Houston is another guy that's out of contract. He's another guy that, I also put players that I predict most likely won't be back, and you see all these players that I predicted. Danny Houston is one of them, because I did say before where I feel like he most likely is not going to be back with this team, with the way that he pretty much not only lost his spot in the starting 11, but he's not even featured on the bench for the Quakes throughout this season, and that I just feel like most likely that his time with the Quakes is pretty much done, and that, I'll be surprised if he does come back next year with the way that he hasn't even got any minutes whatsoever with this team this season. And then, of course, the big one, Chris Wondolowski. I know there's been a lot of people who's been asking that, but as I said before, the club is in talk with him with a new 1-year contract, and I guess, the reason why it's taking longer than it should be is because, you know, Wando, he's probably or try to send some message to the club and especially the ownership of the fact that, you know, I want to play for one more year with this team and I want to pretty much retire in front of a full capacity crowd at the Quake Stadium. But the thing is, I also want to retire on a high note, and I want this team to maybe make a deep run into the MLS Cup next season before he, of course, retire on a high. So yeah, I think that he basically is demanding a lot of those things, and it's great to see that he is demanding a lot of those things because that's been the biggest criticism of the Quakes and kind of my biggest frustration with this team is that the ownership is just being very cheap. They're being very conservative when they're building a team, and usually when they do build a team that is conservative, they usually maybe get at its best to just barely scrape into the playoffs before getting knocked out in the first round. And you know, Wando does not want to see that happen next season. He wants this team to get even deeper into the playoffs, and hey, maybe even getting all the way to MLS Cup and maybe finish his career on a high, lifting an MLS Cup next season. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for kind of the end of the season roster. Obviously, another thing that I also want to mention is the fact that, you know, we're about to once again endure an expansion draft, which, you know, this is kind of a annual tradition of MLS where every year we had to do an expansion draft. So most likely it'll be very interesting to see that even those players that is under contract, it'll be interesting to see whether or not if the Quakes are going to be protected. All those players that is under contract and all those players is currently in their roster. Well, for starters, they can't do that. They're going to have to at least leave a couple of players that is currently unprotected onto that list. But be interesting to see who, of course, will be on the protected list for the Quakes for the expansion draft and who potentially will left unprotected, and that those players that are left unprotected, we'll see whether or not if Austin FC is maybe thinking about picking those guys from the Quakes. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the Quakes end of season roster? I know I was really hoping that when I see the list of players that won't likely come back would be a little bit more than just the 4 players that I kind of mentioned, and that I thought there was more people that is going to be more players that was out of contract where we can get rid of some of the debt weight and bring in some new pieces. But that being said, I think 4 players is plenty enough, and that all those 4 of these players are kind of represent the dead weight that we had, and that we need to potentially find some replacement for them heading into this offseason, and hopefully the ownership will acknowledge that and actually spend some money in terms of finding those replacements. But till then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.